Hello and welcome to episode 214 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. My guests on the show today will be Natalie and Hannah of the Stride Sisters podcast. On their podcast, they focus heavily on runDisney events, and they took their listeners through their training for the Dopey Challenge back in January as part of Walt Disney World Marathon Weekend. They also were nice enough to have me as a guest on the Stride Sisters podcast on Christmas Eve. Before we get started, I'm just going to make my weekly appeal that each and every one of you subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. It is March, which means baseball is back for spring training. St. Patrick's Day is coming up in a few days, and it's National Women's History Month here in the United States. In some form or fashion, we will cover all of those things on the podcast, but also in videos and vlogs. This month also marks the 5-year anniversary of the world shutting down for the pandemic. I'm planning a special video to take us back to those initial days of worry when the parks were closed. If you're subscribed to the channel, make sure to tell all of your travel-loving friends about the show. Click the like button for your favorite videos and podcasts, and drop as many positive comments as possible. All of those things help us get our content in front of more eyes so we can continue to grow this thing. Right now, let's welcome the Stride Sisters to the show. Thanks for being here, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
And likewise, Hannah, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So, Natalie and Hannah host the Stride Sisters podcast. And this is a podcast that is heavily focused on runDisney. And back in January, Hannah reached a huge milestone where she completed her first Dopey challenge. So first of all, congratulations, Hannah.
Whoop, whoop. Is it in bad form to cheer for myself?
It is absolutely not. That is... How long have you been in the running community? That's like 90% of it.
Apparently not long enough.
So, first of all, what besides Natalie, and I guess if Natalie is the only answer, gave you the motivation to try to conquer a Dopey? And I guess maybe even before answering that question, why don't you tell everybody, what is a Dopey challenge?
Sure. So the Dopey challenge takes place every January at Walt Disney World during their marathon weekend. It involves running all 4 races that they host that weekend, which include a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and a full marathon, all totaling 48.6 miles.
And then what made you do it?
Pretty sure I'm insane. And I've always kind of been that person that wants to do something more and like take that next step and make it harder, make it harder, make it harder. And it is Natalie's fault for sure that I even started the runDisney journey. We kind of talk about it sometimes on our podcast, but we both used to be like swimmers and play water polo. We were aquatic based sport athletes. And we've made the jump to land. I hated running, and runDisney is like why I started running. And the idea of doing like the ultimate runDisney challenge was like, gotta do it. I think what I've got left on like the challenge bracket is to eventually finish all the weekends, all their challenges, and coast to coast.
Excellent. So Natalie, you have now done 2 Dopey challenges, and what made you come back and do it again? Like, when you accomplish something like this, I feel, for example, when I did my first ever race, and I trained for my first ever race, it was only 4.2 miles. Like, it wasn't anything huge compared to other things that I've done. And I was like, okay, I want to use this as motivation to get into shape. I'm going to hit the treadmill. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to run a 4.2 mile race. I'm going to get my medal. And that was going to be my motivation. And then when I finished and my wife was there at the finish line, I was like, okay, I do this now. Like, this is my personality now, is doing these races. So once you finished your first Dopey, did you know immediately that you wanted to hit it right away? Or did it take a while before you really thought, I want to do this again?
Oh, I'd say before I even hit the finish line, I had thoughts of this is how we're going to do this next time, and this is how we're going to do this better. So definitely someone who's relatively self-competitive in the way of I always think of opportunities for improvement, and I knew that I had some unfinished business with the Dopey challenge. I did take a year off of Dopey, in that I did my first Dopey in 23, did the Goofy Challenge in 24, which is the half and full, and then came back for Dopey in 25 when I had told myself I was doing the standalone marathon. So I don't know how that works, but um, it was definitely a good time coming. I feel like I've at least finished that somewhat unfinished business of, had a really good training cycle and whatnot, but I'm not saying this is not the end of my Dopey journey. I can tell you for a fact.
And Hannah, did having somebody like Natalie who had already accomplished a Dopey help you in your journey? Like, you knew some of the things that you were going to have to prepare for along the way? Or is it just one of those communities where you already kind of know what to expect because everybody is so open about helping?
I feel like it's somehow both. Like, for sure, Natalie helped me in so many ways. There are things that you just do not think about until you are in that situation. And as a good friend, she did try her best to warn me of as many things as possible up front, chafing being the big one. And but the community in the same way, there were definitely a lot of things that I kind of felt like I knew about going in, about like what was my park plan gonna be? Was I gonna go to the parks at this on the days that I was also running, and how was I gonna balance that? There was a lot of planning and plotting leading up to it.
Well, what did you end up deciding? Did you go to the parks on the day that you had races?
We did, not all of them, but we did Animal Kingdom the day of the 5K. I take that back. We did that the day of the expo. It's already a blur. Um, but we did Animal Kingdom, then we did Magic
Magic.
Kingdom, and then we did Hollywood Studios and Epcot. And then we did Hollywood Studios and Epcot again on the Monday after. So we did a little before and a little after. And I was very impressed with myself that I actually could go to the parks after, because after my first marathon, I could barely like walk from the couch to the fridge.
Natalie, did you have any chances to ride rides while you were doing the marathon this time?
Chances there were, but I took this in a way that you're kind of not supposed to take Dopey in the marathon part. And I went out for a PR and I accomplished that PR. So I passed Triceratops Spin on its last operating day, knew I could walk right on it, and I was just feeling it. I was in the zone. I was feeling myself, and I decided no, that I was going to go for it because it's one of the things I say to myself a lot is that I owe it to myself to try. And I was cooking with gas Marathon Sunday.
She really was. She was flying.
That's amazing. So you hit a PR on a marathon at the end of a Dopey challenge. That is insane.
Yeah, I still am a little bit in disbelief because it was something where my judgy watch, my Garmin, had told me that it gave me a specific time, and I actually went lower than that by 8 minutes. And that time was like about my like best case scenario. So I'm like, I think I could still hit the PR. I mean, I PR'd for by over 30 minutes. So what would I do if what am I going to do in a normal marathon is what I'd like to know. Cause I think I fear that version of myself.
I mean, you probably have started to train in such a way that your body is most prepared at the end of a Dopey or at the end of some sort of challenge. So you probably have sort of, programmed yourself in that way. So I did your podcast a couple weeks before the marathon, and Hannah, you were sick. and you had to adjust your plan for your illness. Did you find that ended up impacting you at all, or were you able to put together a readjusted plan that still gave you the right amount of preparation?
Yeah, I worked with my coach, and we were able to adjust the plan. I just took an extra week off where I didn't do anything whatsoever. I just focused on recovery and pushed those workouts out. And then we modified my final simulation by a few miles on the last 2 days to be shorter. And I did it. And by the time we got done with taper and made it to the race, I felt amazing. I really enjoyed it. The only thing that bothered me during the race was my foot. And I think that's just like an old injury that sometimes gives me a little niggle. But I also PR'd and it was fantastic.
That is incredible that you both PR'd on your marathon in a Dopey. I kind of can't even believe that. Natalie, if somebody is listening to this and just next week, really, they're going to go on sale for 2026. 2026. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Walt Disney World Marathon. And that includes the Dopey Challenge. That includes the Goofy Challenge. If somebody is going to say, you know what, I want to do this, what are some words of advice that you have besides just preparing by listening to your podcast?
I think that sometimes the advice is almost contradictory in and of itself, but I'll go for look at what the training entails and be honest with yourself about what your life looks like. And that doesn't mean that, if your first like 2 weeks of training are kind of hard getting into things that oh my gosh, you can't do it when it gets to 20. You're not trained for 20 miles when you start a training plan. Okay. So try not to freak out about that. But before you sign up, I'd say be honest with yourself about your schedule and whether or not, especially looking at when you have back-to-backs over 4 days, that's hard. I live in the Midwest where it is cold and snowy and windy, especially. So knowing, you don't have to have the entirety of the plan in place, but what you're going to do on those cold, snowy, windy, icy days, but trying to be honest with yourself about like, do I have the time to commit to this? Because honestly, besides the fact that my feet themselves hurt because of a lot of time on them, I was pretty fine. And obviously, like my recovery has gotten better over the last couple of years from races, but I'm able to enjoy the parks. I'm able to enjoy myself, not stay in bed half the day because I prepare better. So I'd say being very honest with yourself about, are you going to be able to commit to it? And, when the going gets tough, are you going to make that time for the training plan? That's something that you want to make sure that you have that conversation with yourself before you part with your dollars and give them to the mouse.
So Hannah, as you went through a training plan yourself and you had somebody like Natalie in your corner to say, oh yeah, this is what you should be expecting and this is maybe a little unusual. But when you got out there on the course, I have to imagine you felt prepared. But was there a moment that you weren't expecting? Were there pains? Were there even running highs? Or were there moments where it was harder or easier than you thought it would have been?
Yeah, it was. I would say I was astounded by how good I felt at the end of the half. I'm notorious for underfueling, which leads to me feeling very ill at the end of races. And this training block and with Natalie's help and my coach's help, I really learned to do that very, very well. And I didn't feel bad at all. I genuinely felt so amazing for the first 16 miles of the marathon. I was riding a high. I was like, wow, oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm going to enjoy this. And then I hit the dreaded Blizzard Beach to Animal Kingdom kind of area of the course where there's not much going on. And my feet started to hurt. And my boyfriend, this is also important to have a community. And if you don't have a person, you just find someone on the course. You make a friend, someone to help you through those pain cave, dark tunnel times. They help you keep going and tell you that you can do it.
Absolutely. I remember the last Run Disney race that I did. I should say the most recent, but it's very possible that it is the last Run Disney race that I did. And I was really, really struggling, and I started to get a cramp in my left calf. And I was running so that I could try to stretch the calf while I was running at the same time. So I had a little bit of a giddy up going. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just hear, Rick? And I turn around, and I've never seen this person in my life, but he just goes, "Hey, I'm Justin from Diz Twitter." And he's like, "Here's this thing that helps you not get cramps." Maybe I was a little too trusting, just taking a substance that was given to me by somebody that I had never met before. But I'll tell you what, he gave me a gel that really did help me, stop cramping up. And this was one of them that ended at Epcot. And right as you're coming under the monorails, like you're about to make that really sharp turn, go over the hill and into Epcot. And then once I was able to avoid that cramp and I just finished. So like you said, like it's about making friends with the people around you. It's a big sense of community, even if you've never met the person, where they want to help you. Everybody is cheering for you. And no matter what your time, if you finish in, right in front of the balloon ladies, as you're getting into Epcot or whatever I guess the last park is always Epcot. As you're getting into Epcot, there's always going to be some of the earlier runners standing there with their medals on cheering for you. And that's just one of the great things about this community. Natalie, how long do you think it's going to be until you try your next Dopey?
Oh gosh. So I haven't ruled it out for 26. My only hesitation, and it's a big one, is that I have the Chicago Marathon on the books. I'm running under a charity bib. So, like, do I want to do marathons 3 months apart? Probably yes. But is it the responsible thing to do a Dopey 3 months after that? That's where I'm currently in the struggle bus and have not that long to figure that out.
So as you start to think about planning for the Chicago Marathon and you're used to planning for these Disney races, do you do anything different? Do you plan anything differently? Are you going to try for a PR because it's the only race you're running? Or do you think that you just want to see how a standalone marathon works for you before you start thinking about things like PRs?
That is as good a guess as any. I do think, knowing myself, knowing that Chicago is a pretty flat, fast course, that I'm probably going to go for it.
She better go for it.
Yeah. Chicago is also just an electric race. I mean, Hannah can talk about that. And I think that it would be hard to not really just go for it, especially after a hot summer of running that I have now ahead of me and doing longer runs, because I do summer running now, but longer training runs while it is still hot out. So I do think I can tell myself I'm going to just, enjoy the atmosphere and then go for it. But then the inner competitor comes out and is like, well, like you can have your A, B, C, D, E goals. And then I got a number and it's and the hour is 1 digit less than my current one is. That is what I think my goal is for that.
Wow, that is going to be a lofty goal almost no matter what. Now, as somebody who is from the Midwest, do you think that you're going to have a bigger support system for Chicago because you have so many people in your life there? Or have you made such an imprint in the Disney community that you have more support when you go down for a Walt Disney World marathon?
So yes, I think I'm going to have a bigger, really support crew. My in-laws, my family is all from the Chicago area, but the team I'm running with, so I have a charity bid through the American Cancer Society, is I'm part of the Run Disney Villains Take Chicago team. So it's about 100 Run Disney runners, mostly people who do the Dead Last Start, who all banded together to raise funds for the American Cancer Society. So I'm not without my Run Disney touch, and I'm excited to get to know more of the people in the group over the next year, 6 months, I guess.
And let's just get this out of the way right now. Do you have the fundraising information already, or is that something that's going to happen a little closer to the race?
I do have it already.
Expand.
I do have a fundraising page. I think it lives on my Instagram.
It's
But I do
also
have
linked on our podcast.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so go to the Stride Sisters podcast Instagram page. Go to Natalie's Instagram page. But I would say do the Stride Sisters. That way we don't have to get into last names and ats and all that kind of stuff. You can just search Stride Sister Podcast and you will be able to get that. And I just want everybody to have the information so they can donate and help you out there. Hannah, so she said that you also have experience with the Chicago Marathon. So have you completed that one before?
I have. The Chicago Marathon was my very first marathon. And I also ran under a charity bib back in the day. I ran for Lurie Children's Hospital, which meant a lot to me. It's a big hospital in the community. It's like the children's hospital in Chicago. And I had friends that worked there. And we have a history of raising funds for children with illnesses through our sorority in the past. So it just meant a lot to me. But I'm excited to sort of be in the reverse. Natalie's almost always the Obi-Wan and I'm the Padawan. And I think this is my chance to be the one with the knowledge and the expertise.
So now, as somebody who has done a number of Run Disney races, including the Walt Disney World Marathon, completing a Dopey, what are some things to expect from the Chicago Marathon that are different? What are some of the hurdles that Natalie is going to have to overcome? And what are some of the things that maybe make it easier? Because like you mentioned when you were talking about the marathon at Walt Disney World and that stretch from Blizzard Beach to Disney's Animal Kingdom, there are some stretches on Run Disney races that are downright boring. Like, we always think about those magical moments when the sun hasn't even come up yet and we're running through Batu, but you forget about the times where you have a big old blister on your foot and you're on World Drive and you're 4 miles from any theme park.
Yeah, Chicago definitely has a leg up on that one. The entire course goes through the city proper, and goes through 20 something neighborhoods in the community, and there is not a single dead zone on that course. Every once in a while, someone will say that there is a quote unquote dead zone in like the Chinatown area. That is not true. It is the whole city comes out. There are so many spectators. There's, when you run Disney, the marathon, I got a lot of free candy from strangers. There's a lot of trust going on there. When I was running through Hollywood Studios, and in Chicago, if you want, there are free things being given to you just about every single block. I don't know that I recommend taking all of them, but there's a lot of fun to be had. Probably it's like a double-edged sword, whether it's a positive or a negative for the runner. If you're used to the very, very early wake-up calls that come with Run Disney races, Chicago will not be like that. The race officially starts at like 8-ish. However, Chicago spaces out the release of the runners a lot longer. And when I ran, I was in the last corral, but not the last wave. I was sort of like towards the front of the last corral. And I don't think I started until like 11 a.m. So if you have good weather, then it doesn't matter too much. The sun's up most of the time. But if you have bad weather or it's really hot, you may be running during peak heat.
This is going to be a dumb question, Hannah, but did you go to private school?
Some of it.
Natalie, did you go to private school?
Yes, up until college.
Okay, because I feel like we have this weird group of people who never learn to not be trusting of the people who are just handing us things out of bags as we see them on the road. Here's some candy. Like,
should I question the Sour Patch Kids that come directly out of a Sour Patch bag? Probably. It's already open, but
I just this is one of those conversations that I feel like a lot of Catholic school kids would have. Like,
Yep.
of course, the kid had some Sour Patch Kids. Why was I not going to take them? No, this is all really, really interesting. So when we're talking about the Run Disney Marathon, because I have done some Run Disney half marathons, but I have not done the full, and the full goes through all 4 of the parks. What's the order, and what are some of the really cool things that you got to see this time?
All right. So we dip into Epcot first. This year we did the World Showcase loop at the beginning and then left Epcot, went to Magic Kingdom after that. Then we exited Magic Kingdom, went down Bear Island Way toward Animal Kingdom. What was really cool this year that they hadn't done in either of my prior Walt Disney World marathons is that it was all Star Wars. They had fog machines. They were playing Star Wars music. Tons of Star Wars characters. Darth Vader, Captain Phasma, Chewie, Rey were all out. And it was so cool. I can only imagine, because it was light by the time I got there, how cool it was to run in the dark, especially with the light effects.
I was so confused running in the light for until we actually got close enough. I could see the fog machines in the distance, and I was like, "Oh no, has something happened?" No, theming has happened.
So cool. And then you go to DAC, which I don't want to say is like you just then go to DAC, but you go to DAC, which is exciting because it's been a minute since you've been in a park. Run through DAC, you run right by Everest, which is why that's a popular thing for runners to get on. You ran through Dino Land. I think that's going to be that's a past tense. And exit from there, go to Blizzard Beach. You make a loop around the parking lot that the runners hate. It's really not horrible in my opinion compared to
it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. People make it seem like it's going to be this monstrous occasion where you're just going to be going back to back to back to back switchbacks through this parking lot, but it's just one singular loop. And there's lots of cast members there to cheer you on. And porta potties.
And it's not the Anaheim parking lots. Those are more of the switchback, and a lot of them. And then from there, you go to Hollywood Studios. You're really only in studios for about a blip, run by Fantasmic, up part of Sunset Boulevard before you're on your way out. And then you go on the boardwalk toward Epcot and then exit at the front of the park at Epcot and then head on over to the finish.
Okay, so one of the things that I hear when I'm thinking about running this race is you get that nice wooden surface of boardwalk so close to the end. That had to be amazing because I love the give of the boardwalk and the beach club when you're running Run Disney races, like especially if you're in mile, what are you there by? Probably 24 by that point, right?
Yeah, you're almost to 25.
That is the point where you need some non-concrete.
As long as it's not wet, it is chef's kiss.
Touche. Because when it does get wet, then it's a whole different type of problem. What were some of the specialty characters that you got to see? And I guess if Natalie was going for a PR and you hit a PR, that you probably weren't stopping for the characters, but did you see any that were interesting?
I got 2. I got Jane from Tarzan because there was nobody there, and I also got Bolt because there was nobody there. I just ran up to Bolt, and then they took my picture, and I ran away. There were a lot of good ones though out on the course this year that I enjoyed seeing from afar. There's some of them where I see other people's pictures. I'm like, I don't remember where that person was. But Aladdin and Jasmine, where were they? I besides after the Star Wars loop and like going into Dak, you kind of start to lose me just a little bit because I was entering the hurt locker a little bit.
I have the list of all the characters that were out on course. There was Ariel, Gaston, Belle and the Beast, Abu, Rafiki, uh, Goofy and Max, Panic and Pain, Hercules and Meg, Flick and how do you say? Thank you. Jack Skellington, Mickey Mouse, Bruno. We're not supposed to talk about him, but Pooh, Sebastian, Angel, Sample, Ruben, and Sparky, Woody and Jesse, Mulan and Shang, Aladdin and Jasmine, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, Captain Phasma, Ray, Doug, Russell, Tarzan, Donald, Lilo and Stitch, Bolt, Frozone, and Scrooge, Coda, Oogie Boogie, and Daisy.
Wow. That is a lot of characters. And Megara was there, and I keep missing Megara. I'll meet her one day, I swear.
I have a photo with her, and it is one of my favorites.
Well, Hannah and Natalie, first of all, congratulations. Such an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Natalie, if you want to donate to her fundraising for the Chicago Marathon, check out the Stride Sisters podcast Instagram account. And you're going to want to like that Instagram account anyway. If you're looking for all the Run Disney news, if you're looking for people to listen to while you're on the treadmill, maybe the weather's not that great and you can't be outside and you need somebody to just laugh in your ears while you are getting in the miles, always after you check out this podcast, check out theirs as well. Natalie, Hannah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. See you next time.
This has been episode 214 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Next week, I'm so excited to bring you my interview with Richard Pretlow of the San Antonio theme park Morgan's Wonderland. Richard is going to talk about ultra accessibility and how Morgan's Wonderland finds a way to include guests with all types of disabilities and special needs. Here's a quick sample of what you will hear in that conversation.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. It really does give the parents a break where there's a place where they can come and their kids are included. They're not different or labeled as other. But, we're also for the adults as well. We see a large number of special needs adults and even special needs parents. And I'll give you an example. We actually have a dad who frequents the park. He's a military veteran. He's a wounded warrior. And unfortunately, when he was on a tour of duty, he actually lost his legs. So he came back. He was in a wheelchair. And his son was born while he was deployed overseas. And I was walking through the park one day, and this was my first opportunity meeting him. And he was by our playground, and he was crying. He looked very upset. And me being who I am, in the hospitality business, I said, "Sir, is everything okay? Can I help you with something?" And he said, "No, I'm just so happy because you don't understand. This is the first time I've been able to play with my son on a playground, because our playground is actually wide enough where someone who is in a wheelchair can actually go up and down and all around and be able to play with children, adults alike on this playground." So yes, we're for the kids, but we're also for the adults as well. And when we talk about special needs, it's not just, autism or someone who has a cognitive disability, but their parents are there as well who have special needs, who have able-bodied children, and they're able to come here and have a good time with their kids and with their family as a whole.
You can hear my talk with Richard Pretlow of Morgan's Wonderland next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.